And we need to transition from that being precious snowflakes who, like old magicians, we used to say things and no one understood the words and just accepted it. That no longer is enough. We now have to be real parts of the company.
Today's guest is Aviv Ben Joseph. Aviv has more than 20 years of experience in tech. He is an executive coach working with hundreds of engineering teams and leaders. With Aviv, we talked about profitable engineering, what makes engineering valuable, why impact is hard to measure, and what are the cultural and organizational traits that make engineering teams successful. So let's dive right into it after a short word from our sponsor. Chances are you know of engineering metrics programs that didn't get adopted or failed to deliver the promised productivity gains. But why? Because those metrics live in dashboards, and dashboards die on the vine. They were built for a purpose, then people just forget about them. Sleuth Pulse solves this by bringing metrics and people together and powering engineering reviews across your organization. Sprint reviews, monthly check ins, and resource planning are all examples of common reviews in engineering teams that help you achieve alignment and successful execution. They are truly the best way to make metrics part of the workflow. So Sleuth uplevels them by bringing in quantitative and qualitative data, letting people add context, and using AI to summarize data and pick out outliers. Check out sleuth.io for more information. Hey Aviv, welcome and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hi, Luca. Thanks for having me.
So, Aviv, you have more than 20 years of experience in tech, and for the last 10 years and more, you have been an executive consultant working with hundreds of engineering leaders and teams. And we also know each other personally. We have met in Rome. We had a great chat, which was a great prologue to this interview. So, to break the ice, as we usually do with guests, I would love to ask you, how did you even get into tech? What was your journey?
Okay. So I started around when I was 9. I just, I remember I told my parents I wanted to understand computers more. And they sent me to like the only course in my city back then. So I learned like Pascal and I did, very stupid stuff, but I got them, I fell in love immediately. And ever since then, that was like my thing. So I learned how to code on my own for years. I got a bunch of books, a bunch of different, back then we had all those text e-signs that you had like a bunch of
Yeah.
txt files that you read about how to do all different stuff. And was on a bunch of IRC servers learning how to code, which was very, very fun. And I was coding, I was doing open source with people when I was a teenager, and with people
Wow.
from, other countries I've never been to and stuff like that. So I really, really, the
Wow.
concept of making the computer do things, you think about it and then the computer does it was just amazing for me. So I just fell in love with that.
Yeah, and were you
And
ready? Can I
then,
ask a
but
question?
yeah,
When you were a teenager, were you already thinking about this as a profession, as a job, when you were contributing to open source, or was
so
more like a
no,
game?
no, it was just it's just so fun. Like I
Yeah.
just wanted to keep doing it and want to keep learning. I have this, same habit even today with any hobby I get. I fall into rabbit holes for like months. But with computers, it's quite a deep rabbit hole. It never ends. So I just kept going and going. And the way things work here is just I realized that I was gonna have to do military service because that's
Mm.
obligatory in Israel, and I was like,
Hmm.
okay, I can either go and be a real soldier, or I can go and do the computer stuff, which sounds a lot more fun. And I tried to get there, which was actually a lot. It was probably the best thing for my career, having had
Mm.
the opportunity to work with a bunch of crazy, brilliant people and do a bunch
Yeah.
of really important stuff.
Yeah, at a very young age, also, right?
Yeah,
because the
18,
military
and
service, yeah, 18.
yeah, and that that set me up for okay. Once you do that, I realize okay, I really love doing this even as a job, and from that point on, I knew I'm always going to be tech adjacent.
Yeah, yeah. And this really resonates because it's similar to my own story. Because my father brought a computer in our house when I was very young. It was maybe 7 years old, and I was hooked. And when I was I remember first years of high school, I was already doing some kind of programming thing and design on, the first versions of Photoshop. But like you, it was for me totally like a hobby or a kind of a game. And I didn't think about that as something that could be my job for the future.
Yeah.
And after high school, I signed up for computer science, but it was after a long think. I mean, when I signed up, I think I didn't realize that it was this kind of the same thing that that I had been doing for years, or at least a big overlap. And so I thought, oh wow, cool. This is how it is named. The official name is computer science.
Yeah, exactly. You don't even understand that this is something that people will pay you money for at first. Yeah.
Yes, yes, that's great. And how did you get then into executive consulting? I mean, it's a long jump, but what has been the
Yeah.
journey?
I stumbled my way into it.
Yeah,
I after the service, I went and worked in a few places like IBM. Ran
yeah,
away. I was first employee at a startup where we realized that we probably crossed paths without realizing, like
hmm,
13 years ago. And
yeah,
after a few years of learning a bunch, I decided to be independent with a friend of
mm,
mine, and we did this weird combination where we did like hourly freelancing coding and also tried to work on a few of our own projects on the side. And when I did the coding with a bunch of startups, like we worked with dozens of companies here in Israel,
yes,
I noticed something amazing. I always thought I was just good at, coding and managing, small teams. But I noticed that the founders of the startup we were working with, when we had lunches with them in between work, they got so much value just from chatting and seeing, I shared what I was seeing because I saw a bunch of companies and I'm like, I saw this pattern happen in other companies. Maybe you need to do this or consider that. And I realized that, hey, there's something here. So I kind of slowly
yeah.
started doing stuff around that, CTO as a service or fractional CTO, they call it now. And after a few years of doing that, I decided I didn't want to be the expensive band-aid. I want to work with good leaders and make them better. So I transitioned to be doing more of a coaching consulting thing as opposed to a fractional CTO thing.
Yeah, love this story really, and makes me think also. I mean, you gradually stepped out of the more hands-on type of work and more in the advisory type of work, which is, I mean, I can find similarities to my own role that is more, it's less hands-on, more of a writer. I share experience, I talk with people, but I get to write a lot less code than before,
Yeah.
right? So more toy projects and small things. So do you ever worry about losing some real world touch or hands-on experience? Has it been easy for you to transition gradually into coaching and executive advisory? Do you ever get like imposter syndrome? I'm asking for a friend, because
Yeah.
sometimes I do.
Yeah, well, actually, the coding stuff, I'm like, whenever I do a toy project or I hear someone having an issue with something, I'm like, that can't be that complex. Let me
Yes,
have a look or something like that. I see that, it takes me like, you feel the rust. You're like, you need some time to get the
yeah,
juices flowing, even though now with, all the AI stuff and ChatGPT, things are, a lot easier.
yes,
Because I'm like, what was that function called? And I just asked ChatGPT and he tells me. But what I'm finding is that I feel very, very lucky because we grew up when things were a lot less abstracted. Like I really
mm,
understand the TCP/IP
that's true.
stack. I really understand how networking works. So I might not know the specific new, sub framework or tool they added to React, but I
Yeah,
do understand how things work when we have to debug them or when we have an issue or when someone tells me something that doesn't sound like is possible. They tell me this is what we need to do. So that like critical thinking, I still have that. But I
yeah,
very openly say whenever someone like raises, I don't know, they need help with Kubernetes. I'm like, I'm not the guy
not the
for
guy.
that. Yeah,
Yeah, well, I
and
mean,
that's fine.
I feel this. I mean, it especially resonates what you said that we are probably one of the last generations to understand the internals of a lot of the tech stack of the web tech
Hmm.
stack, and I'm still undecided whether this is for the better or worse. I mean, on one side, we all know that technology moves on, and we don't have to deal with the lower levels of the stack, and we can work at higher level of abstraction. But and especially now with and now and in the future with AI, we are expected probably to work more and more in a declarative way, whatever it means. But it still feels kind of scary, or or unproven, that we can abstract away from, you mentioned, TCP/IP, or I don't know, DNS, or whatever core tech we have been used to deal with, and instead we are just talking with chatbots. I know it's extreme, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
feel like we have the this is really something that I think is good that we were in this sort of borderline generation because it means we
yeah,
understand both. I also see it with my kids. They were born post social network. They see communication between humans as something completely different than what we see. I see value in being the gap generation,
yeah.
and being on either side means you get a bit less of a wider perspective, but it's probably going to be painful down the line where we're going to be the older generation.
Yes, yes, probably. So probably my concerns are exaggerated. So I know I want to segue into a topic that I know it's a favorite of yours, that is profitable engineering. I know this is something you talk a lot about, and I believe this is particularly relevant today in 2024 with everything that is going on. So what do you mean, first of all, by profitable engineering, and why do you think this is important to discuss?
Profitable engineering just means that R&D or engineering organizations ought to be profitable for the company, something that so many startups didn't think about till relatively recently. And I remember seeing how much companies were spending on R&D, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense. You had huge, huge teams doing something that just was never going to pay off. I saw companies invest 6 months of an engineering team to sign a relatively small contract. I'm like, that never will pay for itself. Why are you doing that? And that has been nagging me for years, and I feel like, oh, finally the industry has realized that. So now I'm
Yeah.
talking a lot about this as how to make teams that will pay off with the company. So we're going to see less payoffs, and we're going to see people who are doing things that actually matter, and everyone's going to feel better about what they're doing, not because of a lot of nice perks, but because we're doing stuff that matters and that help move the business forward.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So when you say we are finally seeing companies realize this, is this the product, in your opinion, of this combination of the end of zero interest rates, pandemic, layoffs, downturn on all economic conditions? Is this combination of things that made things maybe revert more to the mean?
Yeah, I think exactly that. After we had like a wild few years with the zero interest rates and COVID, companies grew without even thinking about why we're growing. And I believe that this has made everything a lot more complicated. Even in code, we just talked about how we understand what computers were. Now it's almost impossible because, just understanding the build process of your React, the Webpack, and everything, that by itself takes like weeks if you really want
Yeah,
to understand it. And this is partly the result of having too many engineers involved.
yeah,
You have the time to do things way too complicated. And
yeah,
contrast that with WhatsApp and Instagram getting sold, serving hundreds of millions of users before we had all the tooling we had today, before we had
yes,
AWS and cloud. And
yes, with
they
like
each had like a
20
dozen
engineers.
engineers. Yeah,
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah, it's true. It's insane. So basically, what you're saying is that this is not like a bad downturn in terms of, okay, better times will come back for engineers, and the kind of spending for hiring of big tech will come back. I mean, we are down to earth more for good. This is a healthier environment, and probably the bad environment was the one before that, where there was this uncontrollable spending on R&D teams that in many cases led to unprofitable teams.
Yeah, I think it might return because, there are cycles, but it's a bit like a junior engineer who just learned the factory design pattern and starts abusing
Yeah,
it everywhere. And then you turn down and realize, okay, I can use it only when it makes sense. The same with engineering teams. We don't need 100 engineers for everything. We can just grow where
yeah.
it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So I want to deep a little bit more dive into this. So, what makes, in your opinion, engineering teams unprofitable? So, is it just their headcount, too many engineers, or is it the way they're run? Is it processes, bureaucracy? How has been your experience by working with literally hundreds of them?
Okay, so first of all, I just like yesterday, I think I saw a very nice quote from the CEO of Bending Spoons about the
Yeah,
fact that when they acquire companies, they very, not happily, not eagerly, but very intentionally decide to cut those teams to a size that makes sense for the business to be healthy. And I think that's exactly how we should look at things. Too many companies, we're used to looking at their teams as, we're a family. No, we're not a family. A family doesn't have layoffs, or can't have layoffs. And I think that's fine. We need to create teams that actually serve something. And so the headcount by itself is not bad if you grow fast. But if you grow in a way that I have this graph in one of my articles about the growth of the engineering team should not go linearly with the growth of the
mm,
business, because that means we're not aiming for the potentially zero margin cost of software.
yes,
That's what we're aiming at. You want to see the engineering team grow like in these jumps from time to time, because okay, we have a new product, we have a new set of features we're going to work on, we want to expand to different geographies, but not because we always have to keep shoving more people into this to support the system, or
yeah.
because we're just growing an autopilot.
Yeah, I love the analogy about time because, in my opinion, if your business grows linearly together with your headcount, this is like consulting. You're
Yeah,
selling people time, while
yeah,
instead the whole premise of technology is you get leverage. So this thing should scale and have this marginal cost that goes down, and so technology should help you get there and not increase the number of people together with your margin with your profits.
precisely.
Yeah, and when so one red flag is that so too big of an ad count that grows linearly together with the business. But are there other signs? Are there other dysfunctions that make engineers unprofitable? Is it about culture or process? What are the lowlights that you have seen in your
Yeah, so
executive experience?
let's start with cultures where people don't speak up or see themselves as the techies, see themselves
Mm,
as those who are just there to, take an order. Well, what features do you want? Do you want extra fries with that? Okay, I'm going to do that. No. I think that the best engineers really have a lot of product understanding and aren't afraid to ask questions to ensure that what we're doing makes sense. And maybe I can find a way to cut corners, or maybe because I really understand the product, I have an idea about how we can achieve something that's probably going to be just as good for 80% of the users. And let's see if it's even viable before we build the perfect engineering solution. You have this continuum for every engineer where on one end you have, I just care about the tech. I want to do Rust. I don't care if the code is killing grannies in the street. And on the other hand, we have those people who just care about shipping software that helps, that gets an impact, that does something useful in the world. And we want to shift more people towards that healthier state. It's okay to be a geek and love technology. I still do that. But I no longer geek out about something if I can see no way for it to improve the company, to do something faster or better. So we
yeah,
want that. And especially with, people who are team leads, managers, all the way up to CTOs, we can no longer think we're just, the people in charge of tech. The world is a lot shallower now. You can always
yeah.
reach out and talk to your peers in product, and you should. I recently, not recently, like a year ago, heard a story from a CTO of a startup in Italy whose company, the founders didn't really talk to him enough. They just gave him orders. So they ended up acquiring another startup without ever talking to him beforehand. Fast forward, they realized that
Wow.
the tech stacks don't really match, so you couldn't really integrate this. And like within 6 months, 95% of the engineers in the company they acquired left because they saw a whole mess and realized there's no reason to stay there. So you that guy doesn't have all the fault on his side, of course. The founders
Yeah.
also need to view him properly. But I think that if you elbow your way to the right conversations and talk about profitability, talk about business, you're going to be viewed more as a peer, and then you're going to be there for those discussions and ensure that what you're doing makes sense for the company.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this story. I mean, it's a bad story, but I love it because it's an example of what happens in many companies, and I see this firsthand, especially in Italy, which in many cases, on a cultural level, on the tech side, maybe is less advanced than other geographies, where engineering is more seen as a cost center rather than a strategic function. And I mean, my question is, how do you get there? Why does this happen with engineering and not other functions that, I don't know, sales or marketing? What makes engineering probably hard to measure in terms of impact or in terms of strategic value?
Because we sort of allowed ourselves for years to just do the tech.
Yeah,
Look back a few years, 10 years, 20 years, when startups started being a thing, technology was just so scary for everyone outside that you just by writing software, you just got credit. You said, I'm going to do this, and people just gave you the time, gave you the money, and you did that. But with time, that no longer is enough. We now have to not just be coders, we have to be real parts of the business. This is all the whole profitable thing we're talking about is this. And if you have a startup where you have a technical co-founder, it's easier. When you
yeah,
don't, and you have a CTO or VP of engineering who's an employee, and the co-founders don't really understand tech, oftentimes they're like, okay, I have marketing. If I put more money into the marketing team, we get more leads. I have
yeah,
sales. More money there means more sales. Engineering, they're like, I don't know. I sometimes put more
yeah,
money there, and I'm just hearing about more stuff and more jargon thrown at me. But if you, as the leader there, and the entire people in charge of the engineering team, not just the managers, but also your senior engineers, the principals, those working with product, working with stakeholders, if you stop talking engineerish and you talk
hmm,
business or English or whatever language you speak at the company, you'll see a switch. If you allow
yeah,
yourself to ask those questions and you answer in a business manner, you're going to see things switch. And this is something I've seen a lot. It's possible. But if you just say, no, no, we've got too much tech debt, people are going to
yeah,
look at you and be like, what? Take a loan, right? What do you want us to do? Um,
yeah,
you need to talk about what matters. You can say, we have to refactor that. What does that mean? Why do we have to refactor that? What's going to happen if we don't do that? What are the possibilities? You're not going to see a salesperson say, "Oh, sorry, we're going to have to refactor the sales process before we're going to take on some more calls." No, we're going to sell. So that's what you want to do, and we need to transition from that being precious snowflakes who, like old magicians, we used to say things and no one understood the words and just accepted it. That no longer is enough. We now have to be real parts of the company.
yeah. I love this. I mean, what I'm hearing is that on one side, engineering lends itself very easily to jargon, to this language barrier, so that nobody understands what engineering is saying. Okay, because it's very technical, in the wider sense. And on the other side, I think the comparison you made with other functions like sales and marketing, where you put more money in, it's more linear. What value you get is probably even about kind of a shorter feedback loop. Maybe the
Yeah.
investment in engineering is kind of more long term, and the direct connect the way you attribute results to engineering is more clear than, let's say, to your sales life cycle. So when you combine probably this thing, that longer feedback loop, hard attribution, together with a lot of jargon, people, some non-technical folks and founders and executives might think, what am I even spending my money on?
Yeah, and rightfully so sometimes because you're gonna give them more people, and what they're gonna do is work on their tech stack and refactor that thing and move from mono-repo to multi-repo and back and forth and microservices and monoliths. And you hear about all of these changes, and nothing changes in the front end, right? You see, you look at what your users are getting, and it all looks the same. So like, why are we doing this? And again, we need to focus on giving people value and showing them that whatever we're doing makes sense. Whenever people tell me we're not getting enough time to work on tech debt, I say I wouldn't give you time to work on tech debt. I don't care about tech debt, and I'm an engineer. I care about perfect code. I still have the wristband I got from Uncle Bob from that one time we sat for dinner. I care about that, and still that's not enough. That's not what the company needs, right? If the company just wanted, pretty code, it would just, I don't know, get ChatGPT to write perfectly looking code. We need business impact, right? That's what we need. So make the case for why we need to take time to solve that tech debt. Once you
Yeah.
make that switch, you can create amazing teams that actually are like layoff proof and are not just impact machines, but so happy because you get real reward, not the
Yeah.
reward of saying I wrote perfect code, but the reward of what we do matters. We see it. Users are happier. Business is growing. We are getting more positions, more, they tell us to hire more people because they see that what we're doing is so good, they want more of it. And not, oh my God, you're just so terrible. Maybe throwing a few more people at you will make it better. This is
Yeah.
like the end goal I think we should be striving for.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that the recipe to bridge this gap is to first of all bridge the, the language and the communication gap that this make the engineering speak the business language and explain figure out a way to explain the value in terms of the value that gets produced for the business. Because I mean, my next question would have been, how do you change? I mean, how once you're stuck in this kind of unprofitable, to keep the same analogy, mindset or organization, how do you move the needle, right? I mean, you're in an organization where executives or co-founders are non-technical. They don't really understand what their technical counterparts are saying, and the other people talk about paying back technical debt, as you said before, or doing architectural investments, and this doesn't make any sense for them. Uh, so how do you catch up? How do you improve on that? Is there about doing small things first, success stories? What in your experience coaching many executives, what have been the recipes that work best?
I usually break this down to three things, and not all companies need all three, but the way I look at it is one is changing the tech executive, CTO, VP engineering, whatever, to not just be really good at the tech part, but also at the executive part. And that's speaking business, having a real peer relationship with their peers in
Mm,
product, in sales and marketing. This is something we work on one with coaching, but anyone can do. Just tell yourself, and I really believe that if you can learn how to manage an organization, if you can learn programming, you can talk to your peers about the business. It's not that complicated. I promise you, Kubernetes is a lot more complex. So do that. And that's part one. Part two is about having this sort of alignment and culture we talked about earlier, where we sort of aligned the organization about what is a healthy tech team. What should we feel proud about? And yeah, we need to be proud about the code we're producing and about the craft itself. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it doesn't achieve any results. So this is what we measure ourselves by, not the perks, not how many hours you sit on the chair coding. I don't care about that. If you can get the work done in 5 hours a day, and the rest of the time you want to research and learn, I would be happy. I know that many people feel like that's problematic, but I'm like, if someone is producing the same amount of work I would have expected, I'm fine with that. Let's do that. So that's number two, the culture. And number three, you really, really have to understand what you're doing. I used to, when I worked at IBM, I was like 20 layers removed from a customer. I have no idea if the code I wrote was ever used by a real customer. I
mm,
don't know. I didn't know when it was deployed. I didn't know if someone had issues. You heard about things like 6 months later, a whole mess. So I didn't care. I only cared about code, writing perfect code, because that's the only way I had to feel like I was doing something worthwhile. That's the path of least resistance for engineers. You need to connect them to the product. And I call this product mastery, call it whatever you want. I find the easiest way to do it is to make the engineers really understand the product, the users, what they're doing, and you can understand it either, if you're doing just B2C, that's easy, but I will
Hmm.
say you can get that anytime. And I was sold on this when I worked with a startup here locally who were doing something that s- software for heart surgeons. And just understanding the topic was just so hard, but I saw that in their office they had like this mimic OR, so they could go in and actually use the UI in the same sort of setting and see, oh, the surgeon is
Wow.
standing like this, and they always have gloves on, so you're not going to touch that, all sorts of stuff. They really start understanding this. And once you make that connection, all of a sudden, as an engineer, we like to complain about product specs not being perfect. But my code was never perfect. So why would I expect product specs to be perfect? I always had comments in the pull request. I always had bugs. That's fine. And I don't expect the product spec to be amazing, perfect, have all the details. But if I and my peer and the product person all understand the product better, a lot of decisions, micro decisions, are things that we understand because we understand the product. So I know that I would never have a button that requires someone to stop in the middle of the surgery to click next, because that would,
Yeah.
I don't know, might put someone in danger. And I would understand that, as opposed to someone who doesn't understand it and always needs to be fed that by product. So that's like the shift we want. Those three things: become an executive, not just a tech, a glorified tech manager; make the people culturally understand what we're here for; and connect them to the product. And I always start with those three. If we have that, we're golden.
Love this, and I have questions now about all of them. So when it comes to the shift, the first one, so going from tech manager role to a true executive, business executive that is in tech, right? How do you how do you learn that? Because you said something that is very important to me. That is, you can learn that. You can learn everything. I mean, if you can learn Kubernetes, you can learn how to speak with business partners, and it's probably easier. I think where many people get stuck is that to learn Kubernetes, it's probably clearer what the path is. You know, it's complicated, but maybe you can learn through courses, books, examples. You know, we know how to get there. But when it comes to communication, soft skills, and strategy skills, people think maybe I can just learn on the job, you know, but by just continue doing what I'm doing. Do you think there is a better way? Do you think people should go to books or coaching or other ways to do intentional learning about that?
Yeah, I think that with anything, we need to learn intentionally, or we can progress a lot faster if we learn intentionally and not just try and get, I'll go with the flow and see what happens. Now, there are people who naturally will find it easier. Like people coming from a tech background probably found tech easier than other people. And I'm not saying that anyone can be anyone. I could never be, no matter how much I'm going to work with. I don't know. I can have Tony Robbins in my house for a month. I'm not going to be Steve Jobs on stage. Okay, that's not going to happen. However, you can get pretty damn good if you understand that this can change. And I find that with most of the executives I work with, if they have this issue, the problem is not that they can't think how to learn; they think they can't learn. They
Yeah.
some At some point in their life, they told themselves, I'm the tech person, or I'm not good in communicating or understanding business, and that's it. They just locked that out. And I'm like, if someone would come to you, and we all just had that a year ago, someone comes to you and says, now we have AI and we have LLMs. Virtually everyone now understand LLMs to a degree because we had to, even though like 10 years ago, this was a whole different path of computer science and you had to be an expert. Now we understand, we are conversant in it. We can talk about this. If we can do that with things as complex as that, why couldn't we do it with, you know, running a company that you see anyone, essentially, every little supermarket,
Yeah.
every little cafe outside, they're all doing this. So if they can get, enough understanding to know what's happening there, why can't you? And we need to make the switch, understand that this is possible. That's the first part. And the second is really finding how you grow better. And I'm a very like autodidactive person. So I read so many books and I saw so many lectures and I went abroad to seminars to learn whenever I wanted to become a better coach. I invested in myself a lot. But each person is different. Maybe you need a coach. Maybe you just need to decide to, and this is like an exercise I sometimes do with people, decide that in every meeting from now on, you're no longer having to pretend you understand everything or pretend that you don't care or unrelated. Whenever you hear a business term you don't understand or you're not clear about something, try to at least once a day or once a meeting ask a stupid question and learn from that. And once you do that, all of a sudden the CMO notices, hey, Luca is asking questions all of a sudden. Oh, maybe he's interested. Maybe he understands stuff. Or maybe I need to explain a bit better because
Yeah.
till now you're just zoning out or on Twitter while the CMO was talking. And once we do that, it doesn't happen in a day, but it is something that you can build on. And throughout your career, you're gonna make leaps if you just work on it.
Yeah, love the advice, especially the part about asking questions. I mean, it goes a long way. And also, I think there are no stupid questions, as they say. And it's true that sometimes, I mean, it's just that people don't explain themselves very well. They take for granted that maybe you have some understanding on what they're talking about. And when they feel that you're more present and you're actually listening to those things because you ask questions about them, they become even better at presenting them. You build a better relationship, and I think it creates all kind of a good flywheel, for good things that happen.
Exactly. Yeah. And I know someone who's very, very good at what he's doing, and he told me that his like mental thing is always trying to ask the stupidest question as fast as possible. Because if you have what you feel like is a stupid question and you wait with it, it just gets even harder to ask it, 5 minutes later, because you're like, but that thing 5 minutes ago, I didn't get that. But if you ask immediately, people don't even realize that you asked a question, right? You're like, oh yeah, that means da da da. Ah, okay, and move on.
Yeah,
But
it's
if you just
clarification.
exactly. I just asked stuff immediately, and it felt like very odd to me at first, even as a coach. When I just started, I had imposter syndrome as if I had to always have the answer. And I realized,
Yeah,
no, I just need to, let's talk. I'm working with very, very smart people. I don't have to know everything they know. I just ask them questions and try and mirror and paraphrase what I'm hearing. And sometimes that's all they need. So just do that. And you'll see that people really value someone who listens and asks questions. That's amazing. We don't get that. We just get people who are heads down in their laptops till it's their turn to speak.
yeah, I love the advice. And so I'm going to the second part because you mentioned that another key element is to change the culture from a culture, I'm simplifying, from a culture that just loves to create tech, let's say for the sake of it, to rewarding the value that you create to the tech. So make the tech like a catalyst for creating value for the business. But how do you measure probably is a strong word, but how do you figure out if your team is doing well? I mean, is creating that value? Can you measure that precisely, or can you just, or are there other ways that are not like quantitative KPIs? How can you figure it out that your team is doing well, is creating value, and you can communicate that to the executives maybe?
Yeah. So, well, this is of course like a huge topic,
Yeah.
but in my book, one of the things in my first book, one of the things I wrote about that people really connected with was the concept of meta retrospectives, because I said we have retros. And we all like to talk about, I had trouble with that framework and that person was sick, so that got delayed. Okay, I don't care about that. I mean, it's important, but it's very tactical. Meta retros are stuff that we do like once every 2, 3 months, and we look at everything we've shipped during this time and we ask, did it matter?
Mm.
Why did we need it? Why? And usually you have to bring in product and you have to do some prep work before to see whether the features are used and to what extent, etc. And once we do that with product and with the engineers, everyone gets connected to, oh, that feature turned out to not be needed at all. Why did we do it to 100% right from the get-go? Next time maybe we can do it at 10% and just see if it works, right? Something like that. And if it really works, we can start thinking, oh, why didn't we give that more priority so we would have iterated about it? and we share what users are saying. We share where the business results. I love that now everyone's recording their sales calls and the customer success stuff, and it's very easy to throw it into an LLM and say, what have people said about this feature? Or did people complain about that? And you can find a bunch of live examples and show it to people and connect them. And this is what we do in the Meta retrospectives. And very easily, you get those people who are not dead set on technology to start having that edge of wanting to see more of that success and wanting to be more
Yeah.
connected to it. And also for your management team, that just connects them more and lets them have shared talking points with their peers whenever they now have a new feature. They can say, oh, maybe we can find a way to do it like that time, or maybe we can avoid that mistake. And we start doing that, and that connects people. Again, it's a process because it takes time and you can't do this every day unless you're a very small startup. But once you start doing that, again, this is a flywheel. I really believe
Yeah.
in no, one big boom change and we're done. I always say
Yeah.
this is about the grind, but once you get the grind going, you no longer realize it. I no longer think about oh my god, I need to test my code. That's just part of writing code, right? Once I got
Yeah.
that ball rolling and I got used to it, I do that, and now I get so many benefits of doing that. Let's do the
Yeah.
same with driving impact.
Yeah, I love this answer. And I think in a way it's like making the life cycle, the feedback loop for engineering work wider. I mean, making the scope wider. Because I think for in many teams, probably maybe most teams, the life cycle is like we get the requirements, we develop the thing, we ship to production, and it's done. Okay, maybe I observe it if it's bug free, it causes problems, but that's the most I can do. Then it's done. While instead, what you're saying is that it doesn't end here. I mean, you should figure out if what you're doing matters, if people are using that, if customers are using that, if it moves the needle, if it creates more revenues, if it's something that you can measure directly, or if it's just a matter of user adoption, if people are churning. I mean, exposing
Yeah.
engineers who would instead be deep in the trenches, coding their own stuff, exposing engineers to the consequences of the things that they shipped.
Yeah, I can geek out about this for another hour, but I won't. But I'll just say, I used to start a lot of my lectures with saying that I literally asked 100 or 200 at the time CTOs, VPs of engineering. I asked them, what? How do you tell yourself? How do you measure? Did we do good? 2024 is going to end. How do you tell yourself did we
Love
do
the
good or
question.
not? 80% said we delivered the roadmap. Okay. Which I say that's like saying, was a restaurant good? I went and they gave me my order. Wow. Right.
Yes. And I
That's what we're
paid at
aiming
the
for.
end.
Yeah, exactly. And like the extra 15% would say we delivered what we had to and the code is really good. Or we don't have tech debt, something very tech related. I'm like, okay, so you gave me what I ordered and the kitchen is clean. Amazing.
Yeah.
Um, but the real edge was those who looked at what did we achieve. And sometimes if you're a small startup, you can't see the sales yet, but you see you tick t- you talk to the people and you say, we see the learning, we see what iterations we've done and how many of those make sense in retrospect and how much time we feel like we wasted because we were stupid as opposed to we wasted because we had no better way of knowing. And I
Yeah.
see a really big difference there, and I want to work on making a lot of mistakes, but new ones, not the same ones. And this is
Yeah.
what we try and do. And once you make that shift of delivering the code is easy. And I say if you always deliver 100% of the roadmap, you're wrong because that probably means that you're buffering things and you're not asking why do we need to do that, and you're
Yes.
not agile enough to switch lanes as things change. I'm okay with changing things up. I'm okay with having some stretch goals. That's all fine. But I want to, at the end of the year, look back and with the team and say, look, you see that growth in the ARR. A lot of this is that team's project and that upgrade you did and that FinOps push we did, whatever, all of those things that move the needle. And if you start connecting people to the end result, they naturally start caring less or not just about the tech being very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I think the reason why many people many engineering teams will answer to your question in that way. That is, we deliver the roadmap correctly, right, in time, on time, and etc. Is about how they see their work. I mean, they see the work as we receive the requirements or we receive, the product inputs, and we have to implement them. That's our duties. They end there. While probably what you're saying is that we are all in this together. There is no like separation between. I mean, if I'm going ahead of myself, you tell me. But there is no big separation between product and engineering. We should have the same goals. So,
Yeah.
are you saying, based on this, should we even have like independent, separate engineering goals as opposed to just product goals around what needs to be done on the product, all together as a cross-functional team?
I would say that you always need to have the team aim for end results, business end results.
Mm,
So OKRs, your objectives need to be with product. And I always say that, engineering and product, it's like that mythical creature. It's the same beast with two heads. One
yes.
cannot win without the other. There's no I shipped all the code, but it was something that no one needed. And it's not I had the perfect idea, but it was impossible to code in a year, whatever. I don't care about that. I care about delivering stuff that actually works. So we have to have that. It's fine to have things for engineering like um, quality standards, stability standards, whatever you need, that's fine. But those are the nice to haves.
Yeah.
First of all, what I want to see people measure themselves first is we get that. And if we get that, I saw people startups where their users were like, yeah, you have huge stability issues, but that's fine. We still get a lot of value. We know you're working on it. That's fine, and that's what I want to create, something so good that people are going to keep using it even when it continuously has issues. I would rather not have the issues, but I would rather, if I have to choose one or the other, I would rather be on that end, not having the perfect code that no one is using. And if you remember, like in the old days, 12, 15 years ago when you used Twitter, it used to have this fail whale. You had this whale come up
Yes.
every now and then because it would just break for some reason for 10 minutes. And okay, and still, Twitter kept being used. Now it's maybe used too much, but it worked. We didn't say, oh, we get the fail whale, that's it. I'm logging out. I'm never going to use it again. No, we just waited. We refreshed a bit and then we continued. And if you do things that people like or that help them, you're going to be there. So that's what I'm aiming at.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, we have always talked about the team perspective of this, right? But especially like in the third part of your answer, you said that there is a personal mindset shift about this, where engineers need to care about the product, need to care about the impact. And there is a lot of talk these days and months around product engineers and this whole shift about responsibilities of engineers getting more full stack, not just on the tech side but also on the product side. So do you think this is where we are going? Also, with everything going on around AI, which makes probably layers closer to each other, and all these skills easier to get for engineers about the different parts of the stack. Do you feel we're getting teams of more like generalists rather than all these layers of specialists that we have seen more in big tech, for example?
Yeah, I'm completely on board. I might be biased because this is what I found even when I used to do coding. These fingers have delivered code in a bunch of unicorns, and I probably push code to more unicorns than most people. And I saw something amazing, which is whenever you had those people who could do the end-to-end cross-functional, not just front and back end, but being able to, I'm not a designer, I'm not a product person, but I wasn't afraid to ask and I wasn't afraid to speak with them, at face value. I'm not saying you all, sorry, if it's not in the Jira, I'm not going to do it. No, I'm going to go there. I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to talk to that person and get things done. And we got that done. We saw results amazingly
Yeah.
fast. People used to tell me, I have that quote like on my phone pop up once a week just because I like it. A VP of engineering told me, yes, you're very expensive. I charge like way too much by the hour when we used to do like by the hour coding. But he's like, "You're delivering in 2 days more than my senior engineers deliver in a week." And that's not because I make the keyboard go very, very fast. No, no, that's because I I would distill things to the things that matter the most. And I think that's where we need to be aiming at. When I say, what should be your default in the tech team, I default to people who don't say I'm a backend engineer or I'm a front
Yeah.
end engineer. It's fine if that's where your core skills at. It's fine if that's what you prefer. I'm perfectly fine with that. I have areas that I prefer. But if you come and you call yourself like that, it's like the tech executive who thinks, I'm just a tech person and I
Yeah.
cannot talk with others. I want people who understand that, this has to be flexible. I had years where I literally pushed code in Ruby, Python, C, C++, Java, iOS natively, Android natively, a bunch of stuff. I got
Before
paid to work
AI.
in languages I didn't know. Yeah, before AI.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's a lot easier. So let's do that, right? I'm okay with
Yeah.
that. I think that's partly why things can be so much fun coding because you can learn a lot faster now than you could a few years ago, and you can deliver so much value if you do the right stuff. So let's do that. And you see that AI is going to take a lot of the, being a very snobbish principal engineer very soon because it's going to have all the right answers for those specific cases. What we need is this layer of connectivity. These people really understand the product because AI is not going to be innovative for a while. It's
Yeah.
generative. It's going to copy things and try and paste them around. But if you want some innovation, you have to have those people who can connect different parts of the organization. So that's where I think we should all aim to be.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this trend and about merging a little bit of these layers more together and having people who can be proficient at all of these things. I think, I mean, this is more of a tangent, but I think in the past decade we have created a little bit too many layers, and probably because we inherited a lot of open source work and system design ideas from big tech, large scale applications that are not the best fit for all kind of applications, right? And with AI giving developers this kind of basic proficiency at everything, I think that will reward especially companies and teams that are able to put people in the condition of using that proficiency to own things from top to bottom. I mean, you said you're not a designer, but now you have this like basic proficiency that makes it so that if you have like a decent design system or a decent framework to build things on, you can have your way around it and you can ship things, and likewise, maybe you have a preference for backend, but if the front end of your team is reasonably organized, you can probably do things here and things there, and it would be good. So it will reward teams that have a good organization and allow people to own things. And I think the benefit when it comes to reduced coordination and just a faster feedback loop for everything, it's insane, and many companies will work that way, I think.
Amen.
Thank you for that. So, speaking of AI, I have a last question. From your point of view, which is kind of privileged because you have been working with literally hundreds of teams, how do you see AI changing the way teams work, if in any way, or maybe it's just early and people haven't figured out really well how to make it have an impact on the team, on the tech side or on the management side, or what are you looking at?
I would say that it's all of the above because I see people trying everything or
All over the
just,
place. Yeah.
head in the sand and hoping it doesn't matter. But I will say that the most effective things I see, first of all, there are those who actually use this in their products because it makes sense. And when you do that, that's amazing. And we've all seen those, and we're starting to see more of that, like recording your conversations with, sales calls, like you can see a bunch of good SaaSes are doing and
Yeah.
telling you where you can notice patterns and where you can notice that you're overly speaking or whatever. I love those. Okay, that's one. Two is where we're, and I think this needs to be something that we all do. We accept that now, if AI is not perfect, but it's sometimes a lot better than, if we used to talk about having a rubber duck on your computer to explain stuff to it. I find that if I do the same with AI, it's actually more helpful because I get
Yeah.
some sort of feedback and not just a rubber duck. So I do that a lot with everything. I think about a title, I think about an idea, I think about feedback. I just use that if I don't have anyone near me, and it's amazing. And I think we all need to get used to doing that a bit more because it's a lot better, especially if you're working remotely or hybrid and you don't always have someone in the team next to you and you just want to, think about something out loud, especially with the voice modes. I'm loving it. So do that, I think. Try it if you haven't. Um, and third, I speak a lot about tech capital, which is the difference, which is the opposite of tech debt, which is about creating code that makes us better, not features and not tech debt, but doing stuff that provides us with superpowers, engineering velocity, um, and internal tooling. And no code and low code tools were amazing for that. And now with AI, you can do things so easily. I see people, making the lives of customer success much easier because templates now
Yes.
get generated by themselves. You don't even have to code them in advance and stuff like that. If you do these things, it's not user facing, but it's internal tooling to make customer success and sales and marketing, everyone become a bit better. Just think about the force multipliers here. So those are the three things that I think we all need to start looking at.
Yeah, I love this, and I totally agree. And do you think, I mean, I've read some research recently about some kind of disconnect between the opinions of managers and engineers about the impact of AI on their daily work. And there was this funny stat that said that managers had these high hopes about, the productivity gains of their engineering teams, thanks to the likes of Copilot and other systems, that their teams would get like 50% more productive and stuff like that, while engineers instead said that these systems had basically no impact or very little impact, like 10% plus or not much more. So are you seeing this yourself? What is your take?
I will say that I'm hearing, again, responses all over the spectrum. But if you look at it, most people, if they really learn how, if they lean in, you get some very nice velocity bumps, but not with all the tasks you have. But there are
Yeah.
certain things that are now just demonstrably much faster. So it's like, why not have it? And one of my clients used to be one of the AI coding copilots things that you might know, and they told me that they see that if you do, if you learn how to use it, if you lean into it, and you don't, if there are those people who look at it and it's like the grumpy senior engineer. If the
Yeah.
code you see is not precisely what you want, they're like angry that this is not good enough, whatever. But if you look at it and you're okay, this is 80% there. Now let's edit it or learn how to prompt it better, etc. If you do that, you just get gains. So why not lean into it
Yes.
and try that? It's not gonna be, right now, it's not gonna replace any engineer anytime soon. It's not gonna give you 3 days of the week back, but it can make a lot of things easier. It can make your work flow more, and it makes boilerplate a bit less annoying. So why not?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I think it requires leaning into it and maybe letting go some ego also,
Yeah,
and accept, that to have some of our work that we are attached to it maybe done by these systems, and lean
yeah.
into just for the remaining 20%. So Aviv, thank you so much. It was a great chat. I loved it, and thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Luca, and a great time.
Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this chat valuable, you can subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the show. You can find all past episodes and learn more about the show at refactoring.fm. See you in the next episode.